Welcome to this week's Renaissance Man podcast. And the reason I love occupying this space so much is I get a chance to interact with some of my favorite people in the industry. My next guest is actually funnier than me, and you don't hear me say that often. Welcome to the program, Amanda Seals.
That's what's up. Appreciate you, Jalen. That is an esteemed intro that I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you for the love. And as an industry veteran, which you are, and I say that with all due respect, your role on Tiffany and Insecure has really raised your already high profile, and congratulations because you're crushing it. What's it been like playing this role, and have you learned anything personally from this character?
It's been dope playing Tiffany because I hadn't done, like, I was actually a theater kid and I was like trained in the theater and acting, and I was like a child actor on Nickelodeon, and I hadn't been back in a scripted role. I've been doing a lot of hosting and stand-up and that type of performing, but I hadn't been in a character role in a really long time when I booked Tiffany. And so it was incredible, one, to have like my first role back into this game be on a show that ended up becoming like an instant classic, but also I think it's been fun seeing her evolve. Like, I don't have any kids, but I was pregnant for damn near 2 years on this show. and so like I have maternity pictures. Like I have a whole like experience of that. Like that looks like I really went through the whole 9 months, but then I had postpartum. So I've gotten to experience this very intimate part of being a woman, like through the eyes of this character in a way that I haven't in my own life. And so that has been a learning experience, like even when we're filming, I'm filming with the baby, like I don't really have babies around like that. So, I'm like, I gotta be very focused. I can't drop this baby. Like I cannot drop this baby. And the baby's mom is literally like right behind the camera looking at you like, don't drop my baby now. But I think what I also appreciated about playing this character was that in the beginning, she was really seen as, and I think some people may feel this way about her still, but she was seen as kind of like high sedity and messy. But really it turned out that she's not, she just has her shit together. So it wasn't that she was really high sedity. It was just that she was the only one there who had like, a real, like full life that wasn't in pieces all over the place, and she was gonna call them out on their shit, and I am that friend. So I did learn that. I learned that I am actually Tiffany in my friendships.
You are, and that's been your personality for public consumption, and I appreciate that. You're a Renaissance woman. Yeah. The theme of this episode is no boundaries, only possibilities. Mm-hmm. Because your creative genius, and you just alluded to it, is so vast. And sometimes it may just go over people's head. So you're an actress, an author, musician, comedian, podcaster, and activist. I even heard you were a gymnast growing up.
And a painter.
Wow, a painter? Wow, you take so much patience and discipline to do that. But you have so much range. But there's a common thread in all of these talents. What is it that has allowed you to be successful?
I think honestly, it's that none of those things were pursued for the sake of commerce. All of the work that I've done that eventually became, professional in some form or fashion, never was started for the purpose of a come up. It was always started for the purpose of expression and authenticity, and much in part for particularly for expression of ideas and love and empowerment for the Black community. So I think what made it successful is that it's all authentic, like, and it all comes from a genuine place of light. And it's not to say that you can't get some good stuff from the dark place too, because like a lot of comedians, like their humor comes from their darkness, in my case, that's not the case. Like I know a lot of people, like they get strength from their struggle. That's how they end up. That's when they, create the best stuff. And for me, it's the opposite. Like I feel like I create the best stuff when I'm in a good place. And so I think a lot of the stuff, a lot of the spaces that you named have all come from like like more of an adventurous spirit versus a struggle. And so from and that's just how it's been work. That's how it's worked for me. Like even like DJing, when I first started DJing, it was because Beverly Bond was like, I think you'd be a good DJ, like every song. And I was like, okay. But at the time, it was like I'm carrying crates, like I'm in the middle of Astor Place in New York with, 10 crates of records at 4 a.m. And then I got to carry them up a walk up. It's like, this is not practical. You know what I'm saying? Like, I remember my homeboy was helping me and we got in an argument and nigga left me on the corner with the crates. And I was like, I'm done. Like, this is not conducive to my personality, because there's probably more arguments in the future and I can't keep getting left on this corner with these crates. So, but then later, like when I came back to DJing, it was because once again, another DJ had said to me like, yo, you should get back DJing. And it was DJ MOS. And I just bring that up because in both cases, like it came, like it was something I started doing because like someone saw a light and I was like, let me go towards that light. And for me, that has always been what has drawn me into these spaces in a positive way and had positive outcomes. And every time I don't do that, every time I go into a space for a different reason, it either crashes and burns or I burned out, but it every time without fail.
Trust yourself. Trust yourself definitely is a lesson there. And also congratulations are in order because you're an entrepreneur as well. Yes. You started the Smart, Funny, and Black podcast network. Tell us about the shows on that network and why it was important for you to start it.
So Smart, Funny, and Black podcast network has actually been not as smooth as I wanted it to be. And I want to be honest about this because I think that all we ever see is people's highlight reels. And oftentimes as an entrepreneur and an innovator, you're going to have to pivot. And that can be really frustrating. And it can be really disheartening. And so you kind of like got to find a wellspring to draw from to keep going and to kind of give you some insight of like, if this is really worth it. And Smart, Funny, and Black Podcast Network is a division of Smart, Funny, and Black Productions, which came from my show, Smart, Funny, and Black. And that started as like a show in the back of a comic book store in LA, and then has ballooned into a tour, a sold out tour that we took all over the nation. We've sold out the Kennedy Center. And now because of COVID, we started doing virtual shows. So that's where Smart, Funny, and Black is stemmed from. The podcast network originally came to my mind frame in 2019. And we were trying to just figure out how it was going to function and who to partner with and, how, and I got to be honest, I have a podcast, Small Doses, that we've had for 3.5 years, but I really didn't know the podcast space like that. And so I partnered with someone who was really tenacious about learning that. And then we finally got to a point where we had developed our first podcast that we were going to launch, which is Adventures in Black Cinema, hosted by the brilliant Desmond Thorne. And 3 episodes in, she was like, yeah, this just feels like too much for me.
Got it.
And she was like, I just feel like this is going to be a lot more on my plate than I can manage. And it was a blindside because we had been working towards this for a year. And then, and so then when we got there, and we finally launched it, I was really surprised. Nonetheless, it was amicable. It wasn't like we had like acrimony. This is what she felt. And I had to eat that. However, in that moment, you're just like, well, I can't do this by myself. Like, I can't manage it by myself. How am I going to keep this going? And so then I had to start thinking of other ways to do this. And I want to say this because it feels like when we have these ideas, like there's only one way it can get done. And oftentimes, like, we think of like the furthest way, like it's going to be big, it's going to be major. I'm going to have 7 podcasts and we're going to take over the podcast space. It's going to be fantastic, you know? And then like, you may have to dial that back, and it doesn't mean that it's a fail. It just means that you may have to revision or reimagine your path. And so for us, I was able to reimagine how we were going to do this. And instead of having a hub in the beginning, we now are producing podcasts and partnering with spaces that have a bigger platform and spaces that have ad sales, et cetera, so that I can still get these voices out there, and so that I can still have the Smart Podcast Network as a hub and as a source point, but we are able to utilize the expertise of other folks who want to bring Black voices to their platforms. So our first podcast is Adventures in Black Cinema, which we partnered with Starburns Industries, and they are now working with us to spread this voice. And we have other podcasts that we are in development with right now. So I just wanted to share that with you, because I feel like we only hear about people's like knock them out the box wins. Like, well, I started the podcast network and now I'm in the Guinness Book of World Records of most podcasts.
I'm gonna have a man working for me in no time.
You know what I'm saying? Obama just signed on, you know, and it's like, it's just not always like that. And I wouldn't say I'm the typical picture of the way entrepreneurship is painted. Like, I am very grassroots with my entrepreneurship. Like, I haven't, you know, partnered with big companies, and I don't have like big investors. I don't have any investors. Mm-hmm. All of this has been funded with money from Insecure and the other stuff I'm doing. So it's really been a labor of love, but at the same token, it's been an exercise in ownership. And that's really important to me.
So I appreciate your honesty and your intellect. And I want to drill down on something you said that's really important for you to say publicly and for me to say publicly, is that when somebody shows you their gambling slip and they won, they didn't show you the other 99 times that they lost. That's game. What you see on IG, the chef in the kitchen, and it looks like it should be on a magazine, you know why? It's because they rearranged it 15 times so it does look like it should be in a magazine. And you're one of the first people, to be honest with you, in hip hop that opened up to me about dealing with anxiety and or depression. And it was so refreshing to me that you were so open about that. And you and I know there are so many people that look like us that deal with that, even if they don't realize.
Detroit, your entire city is dealing with PTSD every day, like for real. Like, it's in the DNA of the city. Sorry.
Correct. And so now you couple that with your talent, you're trying to be an entertainer and be a celebrity. You didn't get into it for the fame. So just acknowledge those hurdles that you still navigate, and we all navigate, while everybody only giving us the best side of the picture.
Well, yeah, I mean, people only show you their highlight reel, not their behind the scenes, right? And so we live in such a media space now where we are consistently inundated with what everybody else is doing, that like it becomes an affirmation that you have to tell yourself, I'm only seeing the highlight reel, not the behind the scenes. And it's not that you're trying to wish bad on people. That's not it. It's just that you're trying to keep yourself grounded in the reality of the human experience, which sometimes feels like it's some other than what it really is, which is trial and error. Right? It's trial and error. But if you're only seeing people's successes, it can inadvertently make you think that you're a failure if you're not existing only in successes. And I know for me, I've had to really, I had to rebuild my confidence. I had to rebuild my confidence because I had 2 situations happen in 2019 that I was moving from a place of love and compassion and thoughtfulness, and they were turned around on me in such an extreme, hateful, and negative way that I was completely blindsided. And it made me question who I am.
Correct. That's what it does.
It made me question who my mother raised. It made me question, just my ideology of how I exist. And eventually it made me question if I wanted to stay here on this earth. And I never got to a point, and I've talked about this before, but I never got to a point where I attempted suicide, but it really made me start thinking about like, well, if I'm this kind of person and there's things about me that I can't change, and I keep having scenarios happen over and over again that make me unhappy and that other people don't like me for, then what are we even really doing? And in depression, things that would normally seem irrational, that you would just like bat away, in depression, they make perfect logical sense. And that's the very scary part of depression. And that's why having a support system of people around you, and that's why going to therapy and having tools becomes very important, because you need to be able to get back to that logic space. And so those are the types of things that I was dealing with, that I have now exercised a number of tools and continue to practice a number of tools to not get that far down that road again. But it still is a constant work in having to reaffirm for yourself who you are and what you're about and your purpose in the face of people who are constantly trying to tell you otherwise, even though they don't know you.
And thank you for this therapy, because that's what we're actually given when we're talking about what our life experiences have been in podcasts, whether you're standing on the stage doing comedy and you're recalling some things in your life that happened, but you're making them funny. I assume being an author, writing your book, Small Doses, represented a form of that. So tell me about the book.
And I'm sorry, y'all, because we only have 10 minutes.
Why do we only have 10 minutes?
I know, because I have to send a new Zoom link. Crap.
Yeah, it's supposed to always be an hour. Come on, Corey, let's roll.
I was like, why was it only? I mean, I have more time, but
okay,
yeah, let's do it. Because I really need like 8 more minutes.
Okay.
I mean, Small Doses, which comes out on paperback April 13th, Potent Truths for Everyday Use, really is kind of like it's like a treasure chest of all of my thoughts about different spaces of life: racism, womanhood, relationships, career, just living in a world with people in general, all of those things. And it really is just kind of like a treasure chest of all of those thoughts and ideologies and processes, and put together through humor in one space. And for some people, they told me that it's like a resource book, like they kind of just go back to it to kind of get a thought process going. And it's not meant to be an instruction manual as much as it's just to be it's just meant to be a source point for thinking about things further than just the moment, at which I feel like we've been trained to do at this point. Like, people don't really philosophize like we used to. Philosophize. We just come to these conclusions.
Serious styles.
So Small Doses is Potent Truths for Everyday Use, because it really is just me cutting to the chase about the common things that a lot of us are dealing with, and providing folks with insight and common sense where a lot of that where that's often lacking, and that they can use for themselves or they can disagree with as well. But it really was therapy for me, because while I was doing the audiobook, I was hearing myself read the advice and insight that I was giving.
Been there. Yes, been there. That's why I called it therapy. Keep going. I did those 30 hours of audiobook.
I read it out loud, and I was like, and I said to the engineer, I was like, oh, I gotta break up with my man. And he was like, sounds about right.
He's like, I've been listening to this for months and months and months. I was wondering when you was gonna hear what you've been saying.
Exactly. He was like, yo, because he also is my engineer for my podcast. And he was like, yes, I'm glad you arrived. And I literally like broke up with him later that day, because it was like, I cannot be verbalizing this to people and then, one, living the hypocritical experience of it, and two, I think I didn't even realize that I was living opposite of what I express
Expect of yourself.
and expect of
Yes.
myself. And that happens to us all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like we go down a road, we don't realize it. So, I saw a review on Amazon where someone said, this book is really great. It must be because my wife left me after reading it. And they gave it 1 star.
Best-selling author. Stay tuned.
So, but I'm in the process of conceptualizing my next book, and it's going to be something different. But yes, it is therapy to express and get things out. And, for some people who are not performers, journaling still does that, like going to therapy and talking still does that. Boxing still does that. These are all ways in which you are releasing. And we are just, as Americans, not really taught to do that. I don't know that anyone is actually, but I know within this culture, we're not really taught how powerful releasing can be. We're taught to really suppress and make everybody like you.
Absolutely. Well said. And final question before I get into my Gone in 60 Seconds. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's an honor to have you on. But there's going to be an episode in March that airs, and it's titled Women's History Month. What woman, dead or alive, inspired you to be your best, and why?
My mom. I'm not going to say that I wasn't blessed with so many, just innumerable images of women, particularly Black women throughout my life, because I have been, from whether we're talking Harriet Tubman to the late Cicely Tyson to Serena to Sade to Whitney. The list goes on. And, Angela Davis, I've had incredible educators. So I have been very, very blessed. I consider my highest form of privilege to be how many educators I came across that gave a damn about me. And I feel like that really has been a huge part of how I got to where I am. But my mom was just a consummate work. She had consummate work ethic and instilled that in me. And she also was a consummate fighter for just justice in every situation, right? Mm-hmm. So whether it's justice in, the ending of apartheid in South Africa, or justice in I just saw you cut in front of that woman in line and that is not okay. So it's I was always just being a witness to my mother, who made it very clear that 1, your reputation speaks before you, so you need to protect it. Mm-hmm. 2, that, if you see something, say something. You cannot be complicit to injustice. And mm-hmm. 3, that your work speaks for you louder than you. And so I at one point in time, my name was Amanda Diva. And when I decided to change it back to my regular name, people were like, how can you change your name? That's your brand. And I was like, nah, my brand is my work. Mm-hmm. If that's that. So, I thank my mom for instilling those values in me, because even when you're watching folks and you're influenced by them, it's still kind of who's closest to you that ends up affecting you most.
All right, well, here we go. Before I let you get out of here, I do this segment again, as I mentioned, called Gone in 60 Seconds. They're rapid fire questions. Are you ready to be on the hot seat?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get it. I know you like to DJ. What's your go-to song to get the party started?
So Death Bass All Stars, My Boo.
Sports question. You were born in LA but raised in Orlando. Which Shaquille O'Neal is your favorite? Shaq with the Lakers or Shaq with the Magic?
The Shaq who slid in my DMs one time and then erased the messages.
Come on, Big Diesel. I saw you trying to slide in Meg Thee Stallion's comments. I love you, big fella. You're a Renaissance woman, as I mentioned. What is something you like to accomplish that you haven't already done?
I would like to do I would like to write a book of short stories of Black love.
That's dope. You're making waves in podcasts. What's your favorite podcast?
My favorite podcast is Jessica Lanyado, Ghost of a Podcast, where she combines astrology and advice.
And last but not least, we now have the first Black female vice president. What's the next position or achievement you would like to see a woman step into?
I would like to see several Black women senators.
We learned that for sure through this last election cycle.
Yes.
I appreciate the love. Thank you very much for being you.
Thank
Amanda Seales.